Welcome back to Who Is on MagicUntapped.com and Magic Untapped right here on YouTube. I am Barry White. This is where we take a look at the origins and backstories of various characters across the Magic the Gathering multiverse. In this video, we will take a look at one of the greatest thieves ever in Magic's multiverse. One whose story began in a Magic the Gathering comic book series, but met an untimely and unceremonious end during the events of War of the Spark. I'm talking about Dack Fayden.
Who is it?
Who is this?
Who is it?
Who is this?
Who is it?
While growing up in Drakeston on the plane of Fiora, Dack Fayden showed great skill in the magical arts, even joining the Magical Academy where he spent much of his youth. He rose to the top of his class and even found a best friend in his former rival, Marsh. And while they were both talented, they were also cocky and liked to cause mischief. Upon graduation, the pair went out to celebrate and wound up picking a fight with a band of ruffians. In the scuffle, Marsh was run through with a sword. Stunned by the sudden loss of his best friend, Dack lowered his defenses and allowed himself to be hit by a strong spell. As he laid there smoldering on the ground next to Marsh's slain body, something within Dack changed. His Planeswalker spark ignited. Not fully understanding what had just happened, Dack eventually made his way back to Drakeston. His promising future now forfeit, he takes up a life of thievery to make a living. While back home, he reconnects with an old childhood friend of his named Mariel. In a short time, they found themselves to be very fond of one another. He tells her of what happened since that night after graduation, and of the strange worlds he's visited since. She tried to join him on his adventures, but after a while found it much too dangerous and stressful for her. The pair began to grow apart, and Mariel returned home to Drakeston. He went with her, but quickly found that there was nothing for him there. Dack resumed adventuring. One such adventure took him to the plane of Alkaba, where he found an artifact he would like to liberate from its current owner. The artifact, as he would find out, was not left unguarded, as a djinn appeared and beat him senseless, leaving him to be arrested and sent to prison. During a sentence, he was tortured and his right hand stained red to permanently mark him as a thief. Eventually, Dack was able to tap into his still not fully understood gift and managed to planeswalk back home to Drakeston. What he found when he returned was a massacre. Corpses of his friends, family, and neighbors were littered all about the ruined town. His shock and disgust, however, turned into intense grief when he saw, among the countless dead, the body of his dear Mariel. In tears, he fled, wondering if he could have saved the town, or at least saved Mariel, had he stayed. In the time following, and perhaps as a way to cope with grief and guilt, Dack wandered both Fiora and the planes beyond it, honing his skills as a thief and mastering his own magical talents. Eventually, he would settle in Ravnica, where he worked his way into the plane's network of spies and thieves. He even began to make a bit of a name for himself in Ravnica's underbelly. But everything changed for Dack once he stole a certain dagger from the cult of Rakdos, a magical dagger that carried with it the memories of all who had used it before. To his shock, one such previous user who had donned the dagger was responsible for the destruction of Drakeston and the murder of all whom lived there. Through the memories embedded in the blade, Dack was able to discover that the person responsible was Sifa Grent, a planeswalker from the Grixis shard of Alara, and that the blade itself was from the plane of Innistrad. The thief planeswalker dropped everything he was doing and traveled to Innistrad, not knowing what he may find there. He found vampires. Falconrith vampires, to be specific. He was able to drive them off, but in doing so accidentally tipped off Sifa, who was not that far away. He also found a pair of allies in his opposition of the vampires in the Cathar Ingrid Rykart and her father Herman. They knew where to find Sifa, and they guided him to Falconrith Castle, but they only found a single skeleton guard there. Sifa had taken the rest to town in search of Dack, and they would destroy the town while doing it, if so necessary. Looking to avoid another Drakeston, Dack and his newfound friends hastily return to town, whereupon they witness Sifa gathering all of the townsfolk in the town square. Dack was able to disrupt her plans and drive her away, but lost his chance at exacting revenge upon her. The trio return to the castle, but don't find Sifa. Instead, they find copious notes and documents in languages they do not understand. Dack begins to tell them about planeswalkers and worlds beyond their own, but find they are not listening. In fact, they're not even moving. A stasis spell had been cast on them. The spell's caster quickly made himself known: Soren Markov. Soren was in search of an artifact known as the Ancient Fang, the very dagger that Sifa had sold to the cult of Vorthos on Ravnica years prior, and the very same dagger Dack had recently liberated into his own possession. In exchange for knowledge about Sifa, Dack relinquished the dagger over to him, and Soren dispelled the stasis hold on the Cathar and her father. Based off of what he had learned from the vampiric planeswalker, Dack bid adieu to Ingrid and Herman as he departed for Grixis, which was still an independent shard of Alara at this point in history. Quickly after his arrival, though, he was captured by the demon Malfagor, with plans for stealing Dack's spark for himself so he could finally depart the tiny world of Grixis. A task the demon had tried and failed at before, causing Sifa's ascension. Dack, however, was able to escape and, with this knowledge, returned to Ravnica to figure out what Sifa wanted with the cult of Rakdos, and why she gave them the Fang to begin with. When he returned, however, plots were already afoot as Rakdos cultists were searching for him. As he worked on figuring out exactly what was going on, he discovered that invitations to the rejuvenation of Vitu-Ghazi, the massive world tree that serves as home base for the Selesnya Conclave, were falling into the wrong hands. He quickly deduced that Sifa was involved, and had a good idea as to why. Dack gathered a crew of fellow thieves, spies, and misfits, and rushed to the tree. They arrived just in time to confront Sifa and her forces. A battle ensued in the boughs of the tree, and Sifa was gaining the upper hand over Dack. As the Grixis planeswalker was preparing to end the thief, she got tunnel vision, and did not notice one of Dack's associates rush at her with a sword. The blade struck true, and ran her through. As Sifa lay on the tree branch bleeding out, she tries to revive herself by sapping Vitu-Ghazi's essence, but Dack wouldn't allow it. He cut loose with one of his most powerful spells, and felled his foe once and for all. The deed done, and his vendetta fulfilled, Dack began to fall into his old ways. Following a rumor about a powerful artifact being held by the Boros Legion, he broke into Sun Home in search of it. As luck would have it, he found himself soon surrounded by a number of angels looking to arrest him for the break-in. In response, he grabbed the first thing he could reach and leaped from a nearby window, and quickly lost his pursuers in the city crowds below. This pilfered relic, however, was no trinket, as Dack would soon discover, but half of a powerful gauntlet. In a vision, he saw the power of an ancient being, and a lone island. Now dead set on finding the missing piece, he traveled to the plane of Theros. Once there, he hired a ship and crew in search of the mysterious island. Once located, they laid anchor and went to explore. On the island, they discovered a cave filled with skeletal human remains and several petrified human-looking figures. Dack also found the other half of the pilfered gauntlet, after which he was attacked by the Gorgon, Hythonia, but was able to escape permanent harm and returned back to the ship. The ship sets sail back to the city-state of Meletis, but is then attacked by a large kraken. Instinctively, Dack equipped the gauntlet and felt an ancient power fill him. With little effort, the kraken was defeated. Back in Meletis, Dack began studying the gauntlet, and every night since their return, he experienced nightmares. Not understanding either the inscriptions on the gauntlet, nor why he was being haunted by nightmares, Dack sought insight, and met a magic user named Atha, who informed him that he had been affected by a sleep curse, but that nobody knows how to cure it. Unbeknownst to Dack, the sleep curse, and the nightmares it brings, are brought upon by another planeswalker, Ashiok, the Dream Eater. Not finding enough assistance amongst Theros' living, the thief planeswalker decided to take things further, and he ventured into Theros' underworld.
Now that's where Dack's story ends, at least as far as the IDW comic books are concerned, as it was prematurely cancelled after only 5 issues. But Dack does show back up here and there after somehow surviving departing from Theros' underworld.
Upon emerging back among Theros' living, Dack is able to find a person who is able to cure his sleep curse in exchange for the gauntlet. Dack agrees to the deal and, upon being cured, returns to Ravnica and his crime-fueled lifestyle. While there, he became heavily in debt to an Orzhov pontiff named Jadash, whom had been personally financing his heists. Dack tried to get out of it by killing him, assuming the debt would be forgiven upon Jadash's demise. As is the Orzhov way, Jadash returned as a ghost, and Dack still owed him every bit of it. Dack then spent the next few months on Innistrad, trying to find valuable relics to help settle his debt to the ghost, but was ultimately lured back to Ravnica thanks to the lighting of the interplanar beacon the Izzet had been developing. Once back, he, and all other planeswalkers who heeded the beacon's call, found themselves trapped thanks to an artifact known as the Immortal Sun, as he found himself in a struggle against a draconic planeswalker, Nicol Bolas, and his army of invading Eternal Warriors. The trapped planeswalkers convened. Dack flirted a little bit with Saheeli Rai, and considered stealing her jewelry. He also got close enough to Kiora's Bident without her noticing, and made a quick attempt to copy the artifact's powers. Finally, at Jace's recommendation, the planeswalkers were split into teams, with Karn, Obnixilis, Samut, and Dack volunteering to go through the planar bridge that Bolas' Eternals were using as a portal between Ravnica and their home plane of Amonkhet. While on the other side, Obnixilis escaped the fight and planeswalked away, but Dack distracted Tezzeret, whom was using himself as a conduit to power the bridge, allowing the others to destroy the bridge control mechanism in the cyborg planeswalker's chest. Considering his role in Bolas' scheme now over, Tezzeret planeswalked away. The planeswalkers were then paid a visit by Hazoret, Amonkhet's last surviving deity, along with the planeswalker Sarkhan Vol. At Vol's request, Hazoret lent them her spear to aid them in their fight against Bolas. Dack considered leaving just as Tezzeret and Obnixilis had previously, but Hazoret convinced him to stay and help. The crew returned to the war on Ravnica a little before Chandra disabled the Immortal Sun. Rather than taking this second opportunity to flee to safety as many chose to, Dack decided to see the battle through, and when Gideon suggested they reactivate the Immortal Sun to prevent Bolas from fleeing as well, Dack voiced his support for the plan. In the final moments of the battle, Dack found himself surrounded by a throng of Eternals. Unable to escape, he fought them off the best he could. But one managed to grab him by surprise, harvesting a spark and killing him in the process. As he died, he had but one thought: his departed love, Muriel.
And that would ultimately be the end of Dack Fayden. Sadly for fans of Dack, he only got one card, not counting reprints, and that would be the Planeswalker card Dack Fayden from Conspiracy. Now, as for why Dack doesn't have a card in War of the Spark, despite him having a key role in his ultimate end in the story, well, it's because card designs were made before the story was completed, and at that time, Wizards R&D had no idea the character would have such a role in the lore. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and we have a tip jar on Patreon if you would like to support more future Magic the Gathering videos kind of like this one. Thank you for watching.